Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Daily Crypto Byte. Today is Wednesday, September 15th, and we've got some exciting stuff to talk about today. The market's looking strong, some alts bouncing back, including Cardano, some interesting news coming out of Solana as well. And also, we had a big NFT sale. I want to walk you guys through that because it's a pretty interesting process how this thing has traded hands since 2017. Before we get started, CJ, how are you doing today, my friend?
Doing good. Just drawing some lines on the chart, getting ready to do some TA. We're also going to be talking about a lot of on-chain data. Like we've actually made a new all-time low in terms of Bitcoin on exchanges, or actually not a new all-time low, but it's a low that we have not seen since February of 2018. So that's very interesting. We'll get into that more. Also seeing, that golden cross that Twitter loves to talk about, regardless of the significance you may place on it. But yeah, doing good, Monty. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing well myself. Lots to talk about that Golden Cross, and that is always exciting. I think that it's interesting to note that it's not just Bitcoin that we're seeing bullish technicals in, it's across the board. I actually published a trade insight for our members this morning. If you are a member, you'll see that I published one for Link. I'll dive a little bit more into that probably today in our webinar, but lots of interesting stuff to talk about, CJ. So let's dive right in.
All right. Okay. So let's go over some more of these bullish technicals that we've been talking about. I think that not only from the technicals, but also from what we're seeing on chain, this is becoming pretty clear that we're getting some very decent supply absorption, or we have gotten absorption in these last couple of days. Look at those wicks. That's very indicative of what you would like to see in terms of absorption. Saw it very similarly all throughout our accumulation phase during the pullback, and we're gonna have more metrics to go over that are pretty interesting as well. But something that was interesting is that we were really forming this pennant pattern after our consolidation. And, a lot of individuals in TA will look for this as continuation. But, due to that supply absorption, that's not really what we're seeing. We actually have bullish breakout now from this level. And, I did buy a little bit of BTC last night at this close. As I said I would in the Daily Crypto Byte yesterday morning. And I'm definitely going to buy some right now or shortly after this show, now that we are above that critical 46.7 level. Also, we're above the 20 smooth moving average, using it as support. And although, I'm not ruling out another potential pullback to even below our current levels, I'm looking at this as a shorter term trade and a reaction rally back up to the 50K Fibonacci level. If we break through it and create new highs, all the better. Nonetheless, that is going to be the short term target for me. In terms of other bullish signals that we are seeing, we mentioned the Golden Cross. For those who do not know, that is the 50 period moving average crossing above the 200 period moving average. So it's a reflection of basically all of this previous bullish price action we saw all throughout September and August, I should say. CCI looking very nice, turning up back into positive territory, really coming close to the zero line and going back into positive territory. So I think that's a great sign. That's also leading me to have more conviction for this entry. We talk about bullish engulfing candlesticks and candlestick theory, but one of my favorite entries is a bullish engulfing candle at the bottom of a downtrend off of support. And a classic example of that is what we saw at our bottom. When you see these bullish engulfing candles at the bottom of a downtrend, sure, it doesn't come to fruition, or it doesn't go right into your direction all the time, but very often I find them to be very reliable and a good metric to follow for various entries. And that's really what we got yesterday. Also, Heikin-Ashi candles provided us with a very nice green print yesterday, and we're following that up with another green print today. But I think that's pretty significant because the Heikin-Ashi candles really smooth out the trend and give us a better picture of when we're in a trending market versus, kind of a pullback or a consolidation phase. But now it looks like we may be starting a new kind of ascension up into this 50K resistance level. So there are some more technical factors I could go into, such as the MACD and others that are turning up. But generally, I think we've covered most of the basic premises. But anything you'd like to share, Monty, before we get into some of the on-chain data?
Yeah. And we have the webinar later today, CJ, so don't worry, you'll have plenty of time to hit all those technicals and more. But one thing I wanted to mention is something I've kind of been harping on all week here, and this is from Glassnode. This is the total supply held by long-term holders. And I just want to show this on a more historical perspective. I've been talking a lot about it in context with earlier this year, but I want to compare it to what we saw in 2018 and kind of how this accumulation in bear markets creates supply squeezes. And when we see this accumulation, it's typically partnered by the end of a bear market and leads in to a bullish cycle. That's what we saw in October of 2020. That's what we saw here, where while the market was declining, the long-term holders were steadily accumulating. In terms of absolute value, we're at an all-time high for the amount of Bitcoin locked away by long-term holders. 69% of the circulating supply is locked away by long-term holders, meaning this is likely a supply that won't hit the market until these people start distributing into market strength. So right now, they're still accumulating, similar to what we saw here in 2018. And this is typically indicative that we're approaching the end of a bear market cycle, or at least a period of accumulation. So I thought this was definitely worth noting. And I think it's part of the reason why, CJ, we're seeing such limited moves to the downside. This is really creating a sort of a net, in my opinion, for price where, we can't drop much lower than 42K just because of the supply and demand mechanics that we're seeing in the market right now. There's just not enough liquid supply to drive price down 42K, below 42K. So I think that this is a critical factor. I'll be watching the long-term holder supply, because once they start distributing, that's typically a sign that, we're entering the bull market. And once they start reaccumulating, that's definitely something to watch out for as well. So just wanted to share this long-term holder data with you real quick.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's definitely a key level. I mean, the 42K level, not only was it significant in terms of Fibonacci retracements, but that was where we really found great substantial support to drive us up into the 45K and 50K levels following that. So thank you for sharing that. That's one metric that I think is very overlooked by technicians. I think that the supply and demand dynamics are far more influential in terms of an impact on price when opposed to technicals, because regardless of technicals, they're not going to help you if you're trading a cryptocurrency which is just being very, very heavily diluted, and more supply is being sold on the open market each day. So it's important to be aware of which currencies kind of do that and which have a much better supply and demand dynamic. This kind of has to do with what you were talking about in terms of long-term holders, but this has to do with Glassnode data on percent of balances on exchanges. And so, as you can see, when we really sold off here at the end, we saw an increase of inflows to exchanges, and that ultimately was followed up by a decrease in price in Bitcoin. And then something that I think is very interesting in terms of outflows that we saw was this particular spike right here. This drawdown period. Because all throughout this accumulation period, demand, or I should say supply on exchanges, was relatively consistent. And you hear about, everybody on Twitter loves to say, let's buy the dip, buy the dip. But in reality, catching a falling knife is not how smart money trades in most cases. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. It's very evident that larger institutions or players who were taking a good amount of Bitcoin off exchanges waited to see some strength in the market to confirm a bottom and a higher high above that previous level before really entering and then moving those balance off exchanges. And to me, that suggests smart money accumulation or institutional participation because they're buying back into strength. They're not buying into weakness. And I think that's a key differentiator between larger institutions and certain others. So I thought that was very interesting in terms of percent on exchanges, in terms of balances. Also, if we go to the SOPR, we can see that the market conviction is really returning to kind of a period of holding when compared to our previous accumulation period, which was really sustained in capitulation. And then we can see another picture of these outflows. And this is pretty much the same point I was making back here in terms of this massive drop from a balance of Bitcoins on exchanges. We saw that in terms of 4.3K Bitcoin leaving exchanges. And that was directly after the July reversal when we saw strength in the market. So I think that is definitely a good indication that, maybe larger institutions or smarter traders waited to see some strength in Bitcoin before really accumulating and going back in. Or at least they were keeping their balance on exchanges to sell it if they had to. But I think overall, this shows bullish investor intent. Maybe not in the short term, but I think in the long term, 2-3 months, this on-chain data is very, very promising, as well as the technicals.
Yeah, agreed with you, CJ. Agreed. I mean, those two factors right there alone, long-term supply and the amount of Bitcoin held on exchanges, I think is going to be critical to watch going forward here. But transitioning on here, I want to give a quick shout out to a member of our hedge fund team, and that is Nod. He is right now at the SALT conference in New York. He says they're watching live from the green screen or from the green room. I'm going to quickly embarrass him here and share this photo. So he's at SALT New York, hitting it off with Paris Hilton. Hopefully his wife isn't watching this. No, just kidding. But Nod shared some really interesting stuff. Nod's a great dude. And I want to start by talking about this right here. CryptoPunk 5827. CryptoPunks have been all the rage during the month of August. And a lot of people thought they'd cool down here during September, but to the surprise of many, they have continued to rip. And this morning we saw another big sale that is of this CryptoPunk here, 5827. So let's take a look. It sold for 1.22 million, 360 ETH, sold to this anonymous ETH address. But what I think is most interesting about this, and this is something that Nod pointed out to us as well, is the history of this NFT right here, of this CryptoPunk. So today it sold for 1.22 million, but go back to the beginning and take a look at the transactions from 2017. This thing was first purchased for $95, which at the time was a hefty half of an ETH. But this same person sold this CryptoPunk at a loss for then $67 just a few months later. And now we're here 4 years later, and this thing is selling for $1.22 million. So absolutely insane the amount of times this thing has changed hands and the amount of value that it's accrued over time. Another interesting thing to note is at one point in time, it was, for actually a decent amount of time, was owned by FaZe Banks, the creator of FaZe Clan, for any gamers out there. But not too surprising that he had a hand in this, and now it's selling for 1.22 million. Lots of hype around NFTs, and it's just continuing. So another big sale here, and thank you for sharing that with us, Nod.
Would you like to lead into your Doge of the day, sir?
Yeah. So I picked a Doge of the day today. Essentially, so yesterday I talked about DOT, and I love DOT fundamentally, but also what we were seeing technically as well. And that we talked earlier in the show about the Golden Cross. And I think that looking at Link, it's showing a great technical strength right here. And where we're at in the current market cycle, combined with what we're seeing technically, I think bodes very well for Link right now. So I want to just take a look at these two moving averages here. This is the 20 period SMMA and the 200 period simple moving average. As you can see, we are getting close to getting that golden cross. But what's more important as well is the volume. We've been seeing a steady uptick in volume since we bottomed here in July. And now in September, we're kind of reaching even higher levels of volume. Although we have seen lots of bearish volume coming on that liquidation event, I'm very encouraged by the fact that this 20-period smooth moving average held up. We were able to bounce from these levels and continue to show strength even into a relatively weak market. So we got this bullish engulfing candle here, once again bouncing perfectly off this 20-period smooth moving average. And this moving average and the 50-period SMA will be crossing this 200-period SMA in the next couple of days here. That, in conjunction with the fact that Link is still significantly off its all-time high, I think bodes very well for Link over the next couple of weeks here. So I'm going to be watching this closely. Right now it's very technically similar to some other assets in the space like DOT, but I think that just looking at this right now, it's looking primed for some positive price action. And there is very strong downside support now with both the 200 SMA and the 20-period SMMA. So from both technical fundamental perspective and a timing perspective where we're at in the current market cycle, I think Link is actually looking pretty strong here. So that will be my Doge of the day today.
Thank you for that, Monty. I really like Link as well. And I do want to make a point about DeFi very briefly here, because I think it has been relatively undervalued due to those gas fees that we've talked about spiking as a result of the popularity in the NFT market. However, now we're coming to a point in time where gas fees have really come down since the peak in early September. And, I think that ultimately what this is beneficial for is DeFi, because it allows more retail investors to participate in things like Uniswap or MetaMask or Curve, or really any of the decentralized automated market makers in the DeFi ecosystem. And so things like Aave, things like Link, Comp, Maker, I think a lot of them have struggled because of these gas fees increasing. It discourages participation on the behalf of retail investors when gas fees really increase. And now we're seeing them drop off sharply, which I think might bode well for DeFi and the participation of retail investors. If we go and look at the DeFi perpetual index, I think it bodes well. Also, I think that similar to Bitcoin and ETH, we are seeing indications of supply absorption as we see these wicks come down. This is when individuals really wanted to take profit. And if we were going to see bearish momentum begin, I think it would have began right here with a break below this moving average. But each time we went below the moving average, that price level was bought up pretty rapidly. So I think that bodes well for the overall DeFi perpetual index. Also, we have a large instance of convergence now throughout this entire uptrend the past month, now that we have the CCI turning up. Also, we're looking at a potential future bullish cross, similar to the golden cross on Bitcoin in terms of like just the technical formation. But the MACD is looking to turn up as well, and I think that bodes well for DeFi. You can see that we're seeing another bullish engulfing candle, very similar to Bitcoin on the Heikin-Ashi candles. And, very similar to what we experienced at the recent bottom, this could be an indication of the start of a new bullish trend. However, if we look at specific DeFi tokens, and a way that you can do that is just by going to coinmarketcap.com, and they have a lot of various sectors or categories that you can choose from. I have the DeFi category selected here. Chainlink, Monty's Doge of the day, of course, is 3 in that top in terms of market cap. But I would really be paying attention to a lot of these assets over the next coming weeks because of the decrease in gas fees and that cost going down. But as a result, I really like where Uni is at from a technical formation. And so that's going to be my Doge of the day. I think it's very similar to the DeFi perpetual index as well, although it's even a little bit more oversold, and I think it has a lot of room to the upside to make up. I don't think DeFi is going anywhere. I think people are still very bullish on the overall Uniswap ecosystem and will participate in the future. So, in the short term, I like the technical setup, and I still am bullish on the fundamentals of Uni as well, despite the recent, increase in gas fees. But, now we're coming off. So I think that's going to be well for the overall ecosystem.
Agreed. Yeah, the DeFi ecosystem in general just seems very depressed right now. So I like that you're looking there as well. One last thing I do want to mention, CJ, and the commenters are fervently commenting on this, and I think we'd be remiss not to just briefly mention it. But Solana encountered a DOS attack, and this has been interesting for a lot of reasons. One, I'm surprised by how little this has affected price. Um, Two, it ties in with what you were just talking about, CJ, and sort of the network congestion issues that ETH has been facing. Solana peaked at 400,000 transactions per second before the network had to pause and engineers had to investigate the issue. This forking led to excess memory consumption, causing some nodes to go offline. So it was interesting. This is something that, I think more often than not would result in some very negative price action, but Solana has more or less held up to an extent. Any thoughts on this piece of news?
Thing is invincible. And I think the important thing to understand in terms of technology in the crypto space is that a lot of blockchains have trade-offs. And if you want to get speed, sometimes you're going to sacrifice decentralization as a result of that. Solana is a clear example of that. However, I don't think this is, the end of Solana or anything of that drastic proportion. A lot of chains have gone down to have various upkeep throughout their careers or time in existence. Bitcoin went down in 2010. Developers needed to fix a couple things. So this has happened to projects early in their ecosystem or earlier in their lifespan. So I will give Solana a bit of a mulligan. When we think about the DAO hack in Ethereum and how they rolled back the chain, that was another instance of a lot of centralization. However, Ethereum, ever since then, has really become a lot more decentralized. So I think that this is okay for Solana in the short term. It kind of shows the infancy of the project and the stage that it's still kind of in. Nevertheless, I think that this happens. It's happened with IOTA. It's happened with many various cryptocurrencies networks. In terms of impact on price, I think that a lot of times we see something similar to like a Gartner hype cycle. And I think a great recent example is Cardano, because we had all of that hype and inflated expectations coming at us as a result of the smart contracts officially being activated. However, once you run into just very small technical failures, and failure is just a harsh word. I mean, people just realize that the hype wasn't completely warranted and price retraces. And that's why I like to say nothing in the crypto space, regardless of how high it's gone up, is invincible. So I think that's an instance of what we're seeing with Solana. But in terms of entry prices or pullback prices for Solana, I think that it is actually interesting that it's holding up well, despite of all of this negative criticism. Nonetheless, I still think it has more room to the downside as a result of the CCI just really being bearish. We're also getting, or we have gotten, a very bearish cross on the MACD for Solana. And so a regression to this moving average, this 20 smooth SMMA, might be warranted. Of course, it's at 115 right now. It will likely come up to the 125 area, but I'm still waiting to enter Solana. I'm going to wait for a bullish engulfing candle off of this potential support level or off a potential support level, because I don't want to just buy this dip just for the sake of buying a dip, unless you have like a 5-year time horizon, which I think in crypto it's very difficult to predict that far into the future. I mean, it's crazy how the market players have changed just since 2018. But
Oh yeah, and to that point about Solana, CJ, we've talked a lot about Bitcoin dominance earlier in the week and how that looks set to rebound. That being said, a lot of alts are looking strong, like we talked about with Link. So that Bitcoin dominance rebound likely has to come from somewhere. I think that's Solana falling a bit more could potentially be the factor that drives Bitcoin dominance up. But we'll talk more about that in our webinar here at 11:30 Central Time. So that's all we got for today. But like I just said, we got a webinar today at 11:30 Central Time. and that is available to all members of the Crypto Room. If you're not yet a member, you can try it for just $1 for your first month at the link right below me, marketrebellion.com/try crypto. We publish actionable trading insights. One was published this morning with entries, exits, stop losses. We have a 24/7 chat with traders from all around the world that share their insights in the community. We publish news. We have an education curriculum and a whole lot more. So definitely head over there, check that out, and join us for today's webinar at 11:30 Central. And as always, if you guys are looking for a broker, head over to investvoyager.com. They've got 60 plus assets that you can trade commission free. They offer up to 10% interest on USDC, a stable coin, and 12% interest on assets like DOT. So definitely head over there and check them out. And if you do, use code REBEL25 when you sign up for $25 in Bitcoin. That's all we got for today. CJ, any parting words for our audience before we sign off?
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Don't forget, 10 more days until Market Rebellion Crypto 2.0 officially launches. So Monty and I have been playing around at the dev environment, and it's. I think you guys are going to be really excited when it comes out. I'm honored to be a part of such a competent and talented development team. So stay tuned for that. September 25th, we'll be coming at you with more updates as well. With that being said, take care.